Well, hello, I'm Josh, and I'm back with another movie to talk about. So, you may have remembered last week I told you why you need to watch A Face in the Crowd, and this is one of my favorite movies, but it's also quite heavy and serious, pretty much all the way throughout, and I don't just want to recommend a bunch of downer movies to you, so I thought I'd brighten it up with a nice lighthearted comedy. Now, originally, I was going to talk about one of my favorite Coen Brothers films, Raising Arizona. But as you can see, when I tried to get clips from this DVD, they were not coming out too well. So I'll have to put that on the back burner until I figure that one out. I thought I'd talk about another classic comedy. It has very similar qualities to Raising Arizona. It's just as wild and fast paced and crazy as Raising Arizona, but this one came out 50 years earlier. What I'm talking about is Bringing Up Baby. Bringing Up Baby is a film from 1938 that was directed by Howard Hawks. It stars Cary Grant as a klutzy paleontologist, Dr. David Huxley, who is trying to get funding to complete his dinosaur skeleton. In order to do this, he has to impress a wealthy benefactor and her lawyer. He ends up running into a scatterbrained heiress, Susan Vance, who was played by Katharine Hepburn, and after a series of misfortunes, Susan gets a pet leopard named Baby from her brother in Brazil. This launches a whole new series of events, and it seems like no matter how much Dr. Huxley tries to get away from Susan, he ends up just getting into more and more trouble. So, as you can probably tell, there's a whole lot of stuff going on in this film. I mean, I haven't even gone into any of the other characters they made, like the sheriff or the game hunter, or like when Baby gets confused with a vicious man eating leopard from the circus. I mean, there's just so much happening. I think it's best if you just watch it for yourself. With everything that happens in this film, characters coming in and out, it can really wear an audience down. If not handled well, this could have easily become a very confusing and hard to follow movie, but thankfully, this film was not in the hands of an amateur. The director, Howard Hawks, is probably one of the most underrated filmmakers of the classic era. He could make a film in any genre and still make it feel like his own. I mean, he made war films, racing films, cowboy films, gangster films, detective films, musical films, action films, sci fi films, horror films, comedy films. I mean, any genre you can think of, Howard Hawks has probably made a movie in. One thing Hawks really prioritized in his approach to film directing was clarity. He wanted to make sure he made films that an audience could connect with and understand, because he knew if no one could understand the film, they likely couldn't connect with it either. So Hawks takes a very pulled back approach. He lets the fast paced action play out in the frame and prioritizes subtle camera movements to quick cutting. He's also careful as to when shots are used. If you notice, the first almost 20 minutes of the film plays out in completely wide and medium shots. No close ups appear until right when David reveals to Susan that he is engaged. And this close up here immediately tells us two things. One, that she likes David and she's interested in him. And two, that this will become a big problem that will come out later in the story. All of that information is established in a single close up. Today, most films would opt to have an extra scene talking with a friend or some extra dialogue to get this information across. However, since Hawks keeps the shot so wide through the beginning of the film, he is able to use his close ups in a much more meaningful way. Another thing that helps this film hold up today is just the economy of the storytelling. Since all films in the 30s were shown in theaters, Many of the comedies at the time had built-in pauses after jokes so no one would miss the next bit.
Consider my foot. Consider your carpet.
This works well in theaters, but on repeat viewings it can really kill the pace of a film. Hawks saw this and made sure his films maintained their breakneck speed without any stops.
I will not be involved in any more of your harebrained schemes.
But it's not a harebrained scheme. Imagine Aunt Elizabeth coming to this apartment running smack into a leopard. That would be an end of my $1 million.
Aunt Elizabeth,
If you had known it was going to give you $1 million if she liked you and you knew she wouldn't like you if she wanted a leopard in your apartment, what would you do?
I don't know.
Oh, David, you have to help me.
This is what I love about the films of Howard Hawks. If you remember my video last week on A Face in the Crowd, you might recall that I kept mentioning how modern that movie felt. And I have to say, Howard Hawks movies give a similar feeling. Many of the films in the classic Hollywood era that Hawks worked in had a very theatrical, over-the-top feel to them. This mostly came from the music, writing, and acting. Now, these films weren't bad in any sense, and in a lot of ways, I think it actually gives them their own charm. But this also keeps a lot of modern audiences away, as it is just so vastly different from what we are used to seeing today. This is also just what is so remarkable about Howard Hawks. I feel he comes at filmmaking from almost a modern audience's perspective. He knows what things get overused, as well as how to keep things from getting too cheesy and sentimental.
Where'd it go?
She counted her toes and said, he loves me, not, he loves me, not. And then she came up with, he loves me. And then she just said, he's the only man I've ever loved. He throws that line away, Hawks, because he's already done 2 close-ups, so we know it. Another director would have gone in big close-up for that and would have been just annoying, because the audience already knows. One of the things Hawks always used to say was, you have 2 good scenes in a picture, and the rest of the time you don't annoy the audience, you're doing fine.
So now that we know about the film's director, let's get into the cast. No better place to start than Cary Grant. North by Northwest, Charade, The Awful Truth, Notorious, The Philadelphia Story. Cary Grant is one of the most recognized classic film actors in the business. He's also one of the few who can play the handsome leading man in dramas and thrillers, while also being able to take on comedic roles and actually be funny. Several of the things he does and wears in this film would have been completely unheard of for any respectable leading man of the time to do, and yet since it is the suave Cary Grant doing them, it just makes it that much funnier. On a side note, you may recognize Grant's character as feeling a bit like Clark Kent. That would be because Christopher Reeve modeled his version of Clark Kent off of Cary Grant's performance in this film. Grant based his own performance off of the silent film comedian Harold Lloyd, wearing glasses throughout much of the film as a bit of a tribute to the actor. Along with Grant, Katharine Hepburn gives a fully committed performance to this film. She is also quite funny and seems just completely natural even when there's a leopard right next to her. Though many of these shots were done with various special effects, there are still way more shots of the cast walking around with the leopards than I would have thought.
Oh, poor darling Susan. She's in danger and she's helpless without me.
Hey. Oh, what's the matter with you? Now, come on. You don't want to walk on drag you. I'm going to get me out of this place.
Not only is she seemingly fearless around the dangerous animals, but she is also just really funny. And this is her first comedy. Howard Hawks said that he had her ask the great vaudeville comedy actor Walter Catlett to help her with her comedy, and she liked him so much, she encouraged Hawks to give him the role as the sheriff in the film.
That's why she's so great. She hasn't any ideas that she can't learn from somebody, and this was a man who was a master.
Every time Catlett comes on, he just completely steals the show as the dim-witted constable. Looking back, he's not actually too far off from being an older version of Barney Fife.
You're not supposed to touch this key! Only authorized personnel! Smart Alex!
But like any great actor, he doesn't just steal the show for himself. He makes everyone else funnier when he's on.
Who was with you last month in Rockdale in that mail truck job?
Mickey the Mouse and Donald the Duck.
Mickey the Mouse and Donald the Duck. Doc, make a note of them names. Now, you're beginning to talk, we're getting someplace.
Catlett isn't the only one either. This film is packed with tons of great character actors. Charlie Ruggles as the game hunter, Barry Fitzgerald as the gardener, May Robson as the rich aunt, the list just goes on and on. Even Ward Bond makes an appearance in the film. Everyone is just as funny and crazy as the next. In fact, when the film came out, many seemed to think it was almost too crazy. It was not a hit at the box office at the time, and Hawks thought it might have been because he didn't have any normal people to compare the crazy people to.
There was no sanity. Everybody was rather insane, and I thought the picture suffered because of that. And never did it again, and always had sanity to show how insane the other people were. There was no measure of in bringing up baby.
Now, in most cases, I would agree that in any comedy or comedic duo, a straight man is very important to show in contrast with the goofy behavior of the funny man. However, as director Peter Bogdanovich points out, Hawks creates just such a crazy world that the characters kind of fit into it and make it just a one-of-a-kind film. And speaking of Peter Bogdanovich, the director has on numerous accounts cited Howard Hawks as having a huge impact on his filmmaking approach. He even made a film in the 70s called What's Up Doc, starring Ryan O'Neal and Barbra Streisand. That's very clearly a tribute to these kind of screwball comedies from the 1930s. And in particular, it borrows several story elements from Bringing Up Baby.
Oh, you've torn your coat.
Well, that's it. Thanks for checking out my video on why you need to watch Bringing Up Baby. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for new videos coming every single week. Yes, that's right, every single Thursday I'm going to try and put out one of these videos. So be sure to tune in next week to see what I'll be talking about then. But until next week, I'll see you later.
New York is straight ahead.
This guy ain't got all his buttons.
Well, you see,